Welcome to Global Recycling Day. I have to admit, it's probably not the first line in your diary, is it? But we are going to sort of slightly hang our hat on it for the next month or so. And it's partly because there's a really interesting story coming out of France, basically, which focuses on trying to encourage consumers to spend less money on fast fashion. The country has actually become the very first in the world to legislate against what the officials there are calling the excesses of ultra fast fashion. They're bringing in measures to make low-cost clothes much less appealing. Now, that means things like the adverts for cheap textiles will be banned. They're going to add an environmental surcharge to low-priced items from sites like Shine and Temu. Now, there might be a little bit of a nationalistic element to this because sites like Shine and Temu are Chinese manufacturers. And the French are quite keen on supporting local businesses, understandably. But they say that the main reason why they are bringing this in is to be environmentally friendly. French officials say by their best estimates, they reckon fashion creates 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which is astonishing if you think about it. 10%. I thought it was all oil and gas. Turns out it was my jeans. And it's also a major polluter of water. Now, to be precise, what they are bringing in, because I want to ask whether you think this is a good idea and it's something that we should do here. They're bringing in a surcharge linked to fast fashion's ecological footprint. That surcharge is going to be €5. That is about 20 dirhams per item. They're going to bring it from next year, and then it's going to increase to more like 40 or even 50 dirhams by 2030. Apparently, the charge cannot, however, exceed 50% of an item's price tag. So do you think an increased charge like that would make you think twice about buying loads and loads of pieces of clothing that you kind of only wear once or twice? To discuss that, I'm joined now in the studio by two local experts on sustainable fashion. I'm delighted to be joined by Gergana Abdulrahman, who is the co-founder and CEO of the sustainable fashion e-commerce platform Wild Fabrik. Hello and good morning to you, Gergana. Lovely to have you here.
Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure. We've also got Emma Barber, who's the managing director of DGrade. They are a sustainable brand based here in the UAE that actually produces clothing from recycled plastic bottles. Thank you very much for coming in, Emma. Lovely to see you again.
Hi, it's my pleasure.
Fantastic. Right, I have been asked to spin my microphone round. Here we go. Let's turn it around like this. Does that still work? Can you still hear me? We've got new cameras in the studio and we're playing with them, and we want to make sure that that this actually works because we want to put this, we want to share this conversation a little bit more. First of all, Gergana, tell me what your company does. I'm really interested to know.
So we started Wild Fabrik because we felt at first that there wasn't enough beautiful, sustainable items available in the region, especially here. We found that people were looking for sustainable at that time when we started and weren't finding the right kind of things in a way. There wasn't enough choice. And to do that, we created a marketplace model where we find sustainable brands that are more on the affordable side, that are sustainable in various different ways, and we can kind of discuss that further, and kind of give them a more professional platform for people to buy. So we've set up a store. We have an online where you'll find currently over 90 brands across kids, women's fashion, men's. And
if I seem distracted and I'm not looking at you, it's because I'm looking at your website and it's really good.
Thank you.
Like, that's the problem. You look at somebody's website as a bit of research and it's absolutely fantastic. It's wildfabrik with a K.co. And like you say, yeah, there's something from every single section of the wardrobe. Ultimately, you've got skirts, linen, jeans, tops and tees, accessories, bags and shoes, and you wouldn't have thought that there was that much. I think I was unaware that there were that many products available that would fulfill the sort of eco fashion umbrella. Did you find it difficult to find people who were creating fashion that you would describe as eco-friendly?
You know, when we started, actually, this is very interesting. When we started, we had to go globally. And so a lot of the brands that have been with us from the beginning were more from different parts of the world, from Ecuador, from India, from Peru. We have from the UK as well. And then as our journey went along, especially in the last year and a half, it's been an explosion of local brands. So we really, we find now that there's quite a lot of options, and we spent good time vetting and trying to bring brands that match sort of our ethos and are sustainable onto the platform.
That's so interesting. And now it gives me a perfect opportunity to bring in one of those local brands into the conversation, because at DGrade, Emma, you actually make clothes from plastic bottles, a sort of scenario that I can't quite visualise.
Okay. Yeah, we're a local company that makes clothes from recycled polyester, which is what the PET plastic is. There's a huge demand for polyester. And what we do that's unique is that we, we provide companies that need uniforms with a way to make them sustainably, because at the moment everybody makes their uniforms conventionally, and that is not very sustainable. And making clothes from recycled plastic bottles is very green. We use less water, less energy, fewer carbon emissions, and we can give those clothes an end of life as well at the end of that. So it's a whole complete closed loop, from using the bottle to turning it into something new to then recycling it again.
And so you get the plastic bottles from you and, well, I probably don't use that many plastic bottles. That's one thing I'm actually quite good at. But you get them from trash, basically, from rubbish.
Exactly, yeah. So we work with waste management companies. We have our own Simply Bottles program, which we've talked about before, which we run with schools and businesses. That is a really important way of keeping that plastic from going to landfill and giving it a second life.
Now, you guys, I have to say, I've heard of DGrade. We've probably spoken, in excess of 10 times over the last 5 years, because you've been running for some time. And there you are with your COP28 UAE T-shirt. Is that made from your products?
Yes, it is. So we did all the uniforms for COP, and before that Expo as well. So that's really what we do. We try and make sure that companies that have a big requirement for product can make it sustainably.
And have you noticed an uptick in interest? I mean, obviously we had COP28, which got everyone very excited. But, over the years, has it become more profitable for you? Has it become more viable as a business?
Yeah, companies definitely now are talking more about being sustainable. They've got their ESGs, their CSR. When we first started the company back in 2010 here in Dubai, sustainable wasn't a thing. People were talking about green, but it wasn't really sustainable, wasn't happening. So I think that probably, yes, in the last 5 years, we've seen a much bigger uptick in companies wanting to be more sustainable and looking at really tangible ways they can do it. I'm sure we're going to talk about greenwashing, but this is a way of actually doing something that really is very practical and a very good way of doing something sustainable.
Now, Gergana, I wanted to find out whether or not you think that consumers care about this, whether or not they are ready to spend a bit more if it means that the product they're buying is environmentally friendly.
So it's an interesting topic, because especially as of late, sustainability has become what everyone talks about. A few years ago, we did a mass study here in the UAE to really find out what people were thinking for real, because a lot of times we say things and then we do something else. And that's when we found out that realistically, sustainability was maybe fourth or fifth on the importance for a consumer. Price being number one, convenience, value in their eyes, and as well a trend and style being really, really up there. So when we started Wild Fabrik, we focused on creating a more fashion-forward, sustainable brand. So we work with brands that are fashion forward in the sense of they're not your just beige tops and bottoms and just linens, although we have linens and they're beautiful, and linen is a great fabric, so we definitely support it. But there is so many new brands that are focusing on the uniqueness of the product, so not just sustainable in how they're made or where they're made, but also how beautiful that item looks. And that's what's really working with consumers. We see it a lot now. So they're willing to pay more if they feel that it's value, that it's the right price, that it actually gives them a bit more on the style front.
It's interesting that you're managing to find so many different brands to add to the platform. Emma, you've worked in this field for some time. Are there lots of companies who are genuinely making environmentally friendly clothes, or have people jumped on the bandwagon a bit?
I mean, there are people making genuinely sustainable products, but there is a lot of greenwashing, Georgia. I mean, there's a lot of certification that's now coming to the fore because of the fact that companies are making wild claims about the level of sustainability of their product or the fact that it's, green when really it actually isn't. So we are very concerned that we make sure that everything that we do is backed up with the right certifications, Ecotex 100, the STEP program, and Made in Green. And in a lot of countries in Europe, this is becoming law. So whilst they're introducing this sort of tax in France, in Germany, they're ensuring that companies that say they're sustainable have to be able to prove it through certification. And that adds a cost. So it's a good question to ask, are consumers willing to pay to be green? Because actually, sometimes the product is more expensive.
So I have to admit, I'm not sure I am as a consumer. Like, I'm not the most eco-friendly person in the world. I've acknowledged that on the radio in the past. But if you hit me in the pocket, like you charge me for plastic bags, or you tell me that secondhand clothes are cheaper and I'm going to get quality for less money, then I'm all in. And I just wonder whether I might be, well, you did your survey, didn't you, Gergana? And it indicated that actually, being eco-friendly does come quite far down the list. So if we're going to have a revolution, a green fashion revolution, in some ways, if it's not going to come from the consumer, is it going to come from the supplier? Is it going to come from your big, previously fast fashion brands? Are we seeing an enthusiasm from them, a top-down enthusiasm rather than a bottom-up one?
I think it's both ways. It's because people are starting to want sustainable options, and big brands are starting to listen, and they're starting to see that actually is helping raise their sales. So I think there is definitely a change in how brands are, talking or doing in terms of sustainability. But it's kind of both, one is led and the other is leading. And I think people need to still believe that they can make a change. I think every person is part of a big picture, but they also can make a change because it's you. And if you change your mind, you will affect the people around you, and slowly they'll affect others. So we shouldn't wait, for big companies to change or for government to impact. I think everyone has the potential to make a change.
But I think this is also about education. Maybe people don't actually understand the impact of what their action is doing. So the people that are buying 10 items from an online fast fashion brand coming from China, getting them and only 2 of them fit because they're so badly made and cheap, or they just don't like them, but they can't be bothered to return them. So 8 items may just go in the bin. 2 items might get worn once or twice. We're buying 50% more clothes than we ever used to. We're wearing them much, much less. And 90 million tons of clothing is going to landfill every year. And people need to know this. And then maybe that will incentivize some people to make slightly different lifestyle choices.
Also to mention, we think of, okay, we're going to save money and we go buy a white T-shirt, let's say from, a high fashion brand.
Let's just say Zara, because that's where I
Primark. But then how many times are you going to buy another white T-shirt because that one became damaged in the wash or it became misshaped or you can't wear it anymore? So if you actually think about it, you calculate all those shirts that you bought over, let's say, a few months, you could have bought just one good one. That
buy quality, buy once.
Yes.
It's my mother-in-law's favourite slogan. And weirdly, it works.
But there is a difference between ultra high fashion and we just mentioned Zara. And these high street companies are trying to do the right thing. So you go into the Zaras and the H&Ms and a lot of high street brands, and they do have their conscious or their green collections, or they are trying to do it, and they it is about educating the consumer to buy that little bit more because those collections tend to be more expensive.
Yeah, it is. Gosh, it's a difficult one. It is difficult. Sorry, carry on. We've got about 30 seconds.
I was just going to say that what doesn't come into consideration for these big brands is just the amount of stuff they produce.
Yep.
Because we're talking like thousands and thousands of tons of just constantly production. How much did you say?
Well, the Chinese company that we were talking about earlier, they're making 7,600 items a day.
New items.
New items a day, and 15% of the fabric that they use actually goes straight onto the cutting room floor before the garment's even made. So you're talking about waste before you make it, the waste that people who throw their clothes away, just
and then
all
the
round.
fact that what we actually ought to do for our next conversation, maybe in the coming days, is talk about how you can recycle clothes, because I think that can actually happen in some circumstances.
Dubai Eye 103.8.
Join the conversation.